The CPI report, Child Protection in Iowa, brought to you by Vocal, Victims of Child Abuse Laws. You can see our program on Mediacom Channel 15, Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock. It also runs on Wednesday evening at 9:30. You can email us at vocaliowa@mchsi.com for parents out there that would like to ask questions, have comments, or give us a call. My number is 515-276-3956. John's number is 515-282-2672. My name is Don Burgmaier, and with me at the controls is my co-host,
John Harvey, and welcome to the CPI report. CPI, that stands for Child Protection in Iowa. And it's around these concerns that we spend a good deal of time in two particular areas. One is to influence public policy as it relates to child protection issues. And secondly, we like to work with families who need a hint now and then as to how to struggle with the intervention by the Department of Human Services and sometimes even the juvenile courts of the various counties. It's a tough task when you have to do that alone, and so it's a good idea to find somebody, whether you call Vocal Iowa or whether you contact someone else who has had experience with the Department of Human Services. We're not attorneys, so we cannot counsel you at law, but we can give you a few hints as to how to conduct yourself with the department and what to expect and how to respond to inquiries that are made by the department. You may have seen one of our earlier tapes in which we made it pretty clear that you shouldn't talk to police, you shouldn't talk to social workers. You can do so, but you do so at your peril, because anything you can, anything you say can be used against you in the Department of Human Services in writing up what they call their assessments. So be extremely careful while talking to social workers. Answer only the questions that they ask if you choose to answer them at all. It would be a wise idea for you to have some kind of a notion as to what it is that they are accusing you of. Don't give up all kinds of information before you know what it is that they're talking about. Well, Don, parental rights has been one of the problems that you've struggled with. That is knowing just what you can do to maintain your parental rights. An organization called Homeschool Legal Defense has embarked upon a rather ambitious program, and that is to set up the mechanism whereby a constitutional amendment can be written to guarantee parental rights. It's not in the Constitution, and so if you try to make that a constitutional issue, even the conservative judges sitting on the bench now will not consider it unless it's written into the Constitution. I think we have to praise them for sticking to the Constitution and what it says and what it doesn't say, but on the other hand, it appears that parental rights, according to many of the studies or many of the cases in federal court, make it quite clear that we are to regard them with the highest regard and protection. Would you tell us a little bit, Don, about what the Homeschool Legal Defense has done just recently in getting legislation into the halls of Congress? Don?
Okay, I've got a little article here that talks about the 110th Congress that's in session at this time. they're proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States relating to parental rights. In the House of Representatives, June 26, 2008, Mr. Let's see if I can pronounce his name.
Hoekstra. Good Dutch name.
Very good. Introduced the following joint resolution, which was referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Joint resolution. Proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States relating to parental rights. Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, 2/3 of each house concurring therein, that the following article is proposed as an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of the Constitution when ratified by the legislators of 3/4 of the several states within 7 years after the date of its submission for ratification. And then they've got an article, Section 1, the liberty of parents to direct the upbringing and education of their children is a fundamental right. And that comes out of a United States Supreme Court ruling. I don't know if that's Santosky versus Kramer, but one of those Supreme Court rulings made mention of that the liberty of parents to direct the upbringing and education of their children is a fundamental right. And then it goes on here, Section 2, neither the United States nor any state shall infringe upon this right without demonstrating that its governmental interest as applied to the person of the highest order and not otherwise served. Section 3, no treaty, this is very important when you hear about the treaty, no treaty may be adopted, nor shall any source of international law be employed to supersede, modify, interpret, or apply to the rights guaranteed by this article. What's a treaty? Well, I'm not totally sure myself, but it has to do with an agreement that the President, or maybe the Congress, but the President, as I understand, has been making or not just President Bush, but him included, and previous presidents, make treaties, and they shake hands with other countries, giving our rights away and destroying us in the process. So this here puts in the word treaty to block that possibility. John?
Okay, we have a fellow that comes on our program almost every week to give us an alert about things that need to be reformed about the judicial system. He is the evaluator of the judges. He judges the judges. So we welcome comments that he has to bring to this program, because without a decent judiciary, any efforts that we make in trying to reform the child protection system are worthless, are for naught, because we need a good, strong, well-groomed judiciary to follow the law and to follow the Constitution. Here now is Terrance Walker.
Thanks again, John. Well, you always give me the wonderful introduction, but you guys are the real heroes here. I've been doing the work for the longest and talking about issues pertaining to cleaning up the DHS and the child support or child protective issues. I wanted to discuss a couple different things here. For one, there was some upcoming news about not only some vacancies and stuff like that that are on the high courts here in Iowa, and one that's been filled already. Then I also wanted to just talk briefly, since I know we don't have a lot of time today, just talk a little bit briefly about what goes on in a court setting. How it is that people have generally come to the conclusion that that can't get a fair shake in court. And I'm going to demonstrate to you what goes on in the court and why it is that people just have that impression that you're not going to get a fair shake in court. And there's a lot of things that go on. I'm just going to break down a few things that go on. Did wanted to start off by, if you can show that, John. Wanted to start out by showing a appointment. Governor Chet Culver on the 3rd appointed a judge to the Iowa Court of Appeals. Her name is Amanda Potterfield, and she's from Tiffin, I believe, and she's 60 years old. I don't know if she wants us to share her age, but they've got that on the website. But she seems to have a lot of interesting qualifications. She served on the district court in the 6th Judicial District since January of '01. And she was in private practice for 12 years prior to that in Iowa City and Cedar Rapids, and then an adjunct professor of trial advocacy at the University of Iowa before that. And before that, she worked as a public defender in Lynn County. And then she was also with the Union of Concerned Scientists, a New York public interest and research group, in the law offices of Amanda Potterfield, New York City. She served on the International Rescue Committee and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Bangkok, Thailand. She worked as a criminal defense attorney for the Prisoners Legal Services in New York City. And before that, she worked in the Georgia Criminal Justice Council. So this is, I don't know much about her personally, but, you know, it would appear that, you know, for once in a while, they've got somebody that's well-rounded and has a lot of experience with a lot of different people and a lot of different cities and quite a few different areas of law. So that's what we want. That's what we need, people like this on the bench, and that's a good thing. And I'd like to applaud Chet Culver on that. The next page I got, I wanted to discuss the nominating. They're going to be nominating, or actually they did nominate a few justices or potential justices for another vacancy on the Iowa Court of Appeals that occur when Judge Van Zimmer retires in September 4th of '08. The 3 candidates, which the Judicial Nominating Commission selected, are Thomas Bice of Fort Dodge. He's attorney for Johnson, Erb, Bryce, Kramer, Good, Mulholland, and Cochran. Well, they got about 10 partners on that at that firm, huh? He went to Drake University in '72. Richard Doyle, he's part of the firm Galligan, Doyle, Reed, and Galligan. He's also graduated from Drake. And then they have another one. One of my least favorites is Mary Tabor, Assistant Attorney General for the state of Iowa. And she's shown here to graduate from the University of Iowa in '91. And I guess Chet Culver is going to select from one of these 3 candidates that the nominating commission actually pre-selected for him to choose from. So, but I have no input on Thomas Bice or Richard Doyle, but I do have a little of experience in Mary Tabor, and I'm going to delve into why I don't think she's a good candidate for the bench. And I did have a couple legal cases in which she was actually the party representing the state, and in a couple instances, not only does she deceptively misrepresent what my legal filings and my positions were, but she misrepresented a couple times what the legal authorities actually stated, and all this in an attempt to win the case. And I think that, you know, if we're going to have a good legal system and we're going to have a great legal system, we've got to have attorneys that, you know, not only that represent the state in an ethical way, but, you know, we also have to have judges that represent the state or represent everybody in the state. in an ethical way, and I don't think that Mary Tabor upholds that standard. And I don't know if you guys have familiarity with her.
No.
Okay.
I've heard of her at all.
Okay. I thought maybe you had filed something and
No.
had her file something against you. But anyway, she is I believe she's an appellate counsel. She does a lot of the appeals for the state, and of course she has staff and stuff. She has report to her, I believe, but I just do not approve of those tactics to win cases. It's one thing if you're going to win a case and you're going to do a good job and you're going to research it well and you're going to actually represent and argue the facts and the law as they are. But if you're going to deceptively misrepresent your opponent's position and misrepresent the legal authorities that your opponent is citing, then that's shady. That's very shady law. It's not the stuff that good justice is made of, and that's why I do not approve of her being appointed to the bench. Hope she doesn't get appointed to the bench. Maybe she won't be a lawyer for the state of Iowa much longer either, hopefully. But anyway, wanted to also point to an example here. Now, I was talking earlier about how and why our justice system is not looked at in a good light. I mean, we do have a good justice system, don't get me wrong, but part of the main problems that we have is, like I was saying with the case with Mary Tabor, we have a lot of deception and deceit that goes on in the courtroom or in the legal filings as it pertains to misrepresenting one's case, misrepresenting the law, misrepresenting your opponent's position, and it just, when these things add up, that's why we have so many people in jail. That's why it just has skyrocketed so much in the past couple decades that we have the highest percentage of people being put in prison. And a lot of times the judges, they will not argue against. They will not hold a position against a state attorney. So, and when you have a situation where the state will argue that a law is criminal and this guy violated the law, he might have jaywalked, or he might not have jaywalked, but the prosecutor, because he put his foot out in the street and didn't cross the street, the prosecutor argued, well, that's still jaywalking, and even though there's not a clear-cut case showing that is jaywalking, you have the judge that will just automatically side with the prosecutor, and that's what goes on in a lot of these cases, and that's why I would like to show you an example of what's going on. I'll show the first exhibit here. This is just a funny scenario here. Let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that me, Mr. Walker, I went to the store one day and to go get some cranberry juice. Well, and the police arrest me for violating the moonshine law. Well, and then I go to court and I say, well, Your Honor, we need to dismiss these charges because I was just going to the store to get some cranberry juice. This is what a prosecutor in this day and age will do, which I feel is wrong. And this is what they'll say in their motion in response to my motion to dismiss the case for me going to get cranberry juice at the store, and they try to change it into a moonshine violation. This is what they'll say in their motion. Well, Mr. Walker was walking down the street to go to the store for some orange juice. Going to the orange juice is illegal. And they'll cite a case. I just made an example case, Hopkins versus McKinney. They won't quote the case. They'll just put it there as if it says what they're saying. And then they'll say, Mr. Walker knows he was trying to drink illegal juice. We can't let him get away with that. He claims he was going to the store for cranberry juice, but he had none. Mr. Walker has no defense to the charge, and his dismissal motion should be denied. Well, this is what I would have to say to that. If you could show the next exhibit. This is what goes on in the court. Trying to make a moonshine case out of an orange juice case. This is what I will say back to the prosecutor. Mr. Walker was walking down the street to go to the store. He never claimed to be getting orange juice. Even assuming he was getting orange juice, Hopkins versus McKinney only states that the man was guilty of possession of illegal beverages because he had moonshine. And we'll quote Hopkins versus McKinney because the prosecutor won't. And Hopkins says in the case, Hopkins knew he shouldn't have had the moonshine. Whether or not he mixed it up with the orange juice at the store, he was guilty. Now, just because Hopkins' moonshine was mixed with orange juice, it doesn't make orange juice illegal. Mr. Walker was, in fact, getting cranberry juice, but this is irrelevant. At any rate, Mr. Walker's orange-colored cup he brought for the refill of cranberry juice doesn't make his cranberry juice orange juice. So Mr. Walker has a complete defense to the charge, and his dismissal motion should be granted. Well, in this day and age, the judges automatically side with the prosecutor. So this is what the prosecutor would say, or this is what the judge would say to this whole thing about this moonshine case that was made from a orange juice case. These charges were brought under Section 22 of the Iowa Code, punishable by up to 100 years of prison. Mr. Walker filed a motion to dismiss this moonshine drinking and mixing charges because he wasn't drinking. It appears Mr. Walker is mistaken. Orange juice is a juice, and Walker's juice was illegal. Mr. Walker also appears to believe that he can escape the charges because he had an orange-colored cup. Hopkins versus Kenny doesn't state that. Therefore, the motion is denied. And this is Judge Kanger of the Fifth Circuit of the Kangaroo County Court. And this is exactly what goes on in the court system. And this is why people do not believe in this day and age what's really going on in the court systems here is just. We have too many instances where you have prosecutors misrepresent not only the law, but they'll misrepresent the other party's case and what they're stating and positions, and then they'll misrepresent the legal authorities that they cite, and the judge just rubber stamps everything. Boom, guilty. You got a man that was going to drink some cranberry juice. Next thing you know, he's in jail for 100 years because the prosecutor argued that the moonshine law should apply to him, and the judge just automatically agreed. So we got Prosecutor Bonehead that stirred up all this mess, and Judge Kangaroo of the Kangaroo Court basically agreed with him, and therefore we have an overfilling of the jails. We've got a new Polk County jail. We're probably going to have a new prison in Iowa, and everybody that doesn't have good money for a good lawyer with good connection to a judge, to influence a judge, will not get a break. But that's how it goes in this day and age. But that's all my commentary for this week. I just thought I would share with you that funny but not funny example of what really goes on in the courts and why we have so many problems as it pertains to getting justice. I'm sure you can relate to what really goes on in that little brief scenario, can't you, John?
Yeah, I surely can.
Yeah.
That's quite an interesting scenario. You also looked over a ruling from Washington or from California courts. Do you have a comment on that homeschool
I
ruling?
didn't really get a chance to read all of that yet, so I really don't think I'll be able to do justice with it on the commentary on that. But but maybe we can bring that up next show.
I want to thank you for your research and the way that you've put together a scenario that illustrates why justice is elusive. Justice isn't something that we can really count on in our courts. And I noticed last week they decided to really give justice a boost in Lynn County. They're going to build them a $140 million palace over there.
Wow.
I don't understand why, if the Iowa Supreme Court can get by on a lousy $35 million palace, why the federal courts need a $140 million palace in order to take care of the Northern District. of the U.S. District Court of Iowa.
Maybe they need some 100 extra million in kickbacks.
That could be. Well, Don, you have a story that is far longer than the time that we have for you to tell about it, but would you tell us a little bit about a story that looks like is talking about babies for sale? Would you tell us that story, Don?
I wonder how many families have babies. And will your baby go up for the auction block? Okay. I don't know if we have a name here of this child, but it's anyway, this child is for sale by the DHS. She's under 5 years old, blonde, blue-eyed. She's worth $6,000, a top-of-the-line product. You know, they ought to have an auction. You know, that might bring in more bidders. Anyway, the article goes on, we're going to take you behind the lies into the ugly truth that is destroying families for profit every day in every community across America. You won't want to believe it, but when you see it happening and what happens to your own life, even if you don't have children, the same system that views children as commodities to be sold also has plans for you. There is a solution, and we will get to that. All right, I'll change pages here. The system used includes 3 stages. The first phase is to shock and intimidate the parents into consenting to let their children be processed into the system. The second phase is to force parents, terrified for their children, to begin a process of case management. That process is a template that is designed to push the parents into emotional meltdown and bankruptcy. And it's getting a lot of families. Who knows how many thousands and thousands of families that are being destroyed in this process. And Terrance was talking about the prosecuting attorney and the judges. Who pays them? It's the taxpayers, the parents that are actually losing their children, that are being destroyed. We pay our taxes, and then we go to court, and we wonder why we lose. The article goes on. The third phase is to sever the parental rights entirely and sell the children. So they go through this process to make it look legal, and what they're doing is working up to termination of parenting rights. How many parents have went through this system thinking and hoping for a year, maybe 2 years, that they're going to get their children back? And all it is a setup of the system to terminate your rights so that they can turn around and sell your child at a profit. And in the meantime, they get paid for doing all their monkey business. In the wake of this trauma, families are atomized, destroyed. Parents and grandparents never again see the children who connect them to the future. Children lose their past, and the anchoring each of us needs to develop into a healthy human being. Those who carry the process through the stages are well compensated. Agents, caseworkers, judges, physicians, clerks, and others expect and receive compensation for services often not even delivered. Compensation takes place through corporations. State employees who fail to take children out of homes are penalized. Many of these, did you catch that, what I just read? State employees who fail to take children out of the home are penalized. Costs them money. So, if you want to keep your job and you want to keep the money flowing, you're going to be a part of this kidnapping, taking children from families. Many of these leave the system, which Many of the employees leave the system, which has been converted into a system originally intended to help families, to one that profits those in control. Across the country, CPS experienced high turnovers in caseworkers, struggling under impossible workloads for many years. I know when they want a pay increase, they're always talking about how many cases they've got going. 15 to 20 is just too many to handle. But a parent has to take care of their children 24 hours a day, and they don't take that into consideration, or maybe they do. They use that to help, because it's stressful for parents at times to take care of their children. And then it gets a lot more stressful when you dump the DHS into this situation, because they purposely pour stress into the family to get what they want in the end. Termination of parenting rights, and then being able to sell that child in the end. It's profit all the way through for them. Good people motivated to help struggling families were frustrated and unable to help. These are the kinds of caseworkers who simply quit. There are a lot of good caseworkers that apply for the job and then burn out, realizing what they're actually doing is destroying the family. And who knows, you may be the next one. Cases of extreme abuse while children were in foster care were common. Nothing about the system gave cause for hope it was working. Then the picture changed. The idea that instead of providing services, the system as a whole should move to the model of generating income took hold as the concept of privatization was widely adopted by government. Privatization, introduced during the Reagan years, was pushed by think tanks that saw government, a corporation, itself as the logical partner for other large corporate interests. As it said, the idea is changing. They used to offer services to you. And it reminds me of a case of a minister, I think in a southeast United States case, where his teenage boy was rebellious, and he believed the biblical commandment of spanking. So he spanked his child at a teenage age, 13 or something. And some way the DHS found out about it and gave him a hard time. I remember reading in the newspaper that the DHS in that state said they could not comment about this particular case, but they had to drop the accusation against him. The abuse, I'm not sure if it was an abuse report or what they meant, but the reason why they had to drop it, according to the news article, was because the father refused to take the voluntary services that were offered by the DHS. When this DHS offers you services, it's a trap to get you to join, and then you move. Then they can move you to TPR. Well, the father refused to accept those services, so the article said they had to drop it. But then a year later, I find out, I listened to a program, and I heard that name of that father and the case come up again, and DHS had to drop something, but the county attorney must have been motivated that he thought he could win this case and maybe even make a profit, extra profit on the side, moving this case to the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court ruled against him. So, in the end, the minister, who believed the biblical command of spanking, won the case. But he had to fight it clear to the Supreme Court. Okay, the article goes on here. Children, roads, military services. Each of these and more were recalibrated to provide income to those in control. In this way, the problem with social services created an opening that in the late 1990s allowed the least ethical to profit from the pain of others. PL 10589, HR 867. That's Congress passing a law. Passed into law November 19th, 1997, was intended to ensure that the children could not, listen to that, they passed a law so that the children could not be reunited with their birth families, could be placed in loving homes. So they're making it so much easier for the DHS to terminate their rights and then get them adopted into a loving home. And don't you hear the children crying? Well, I do too. But don't you hear the families crying? And when they take children out of homes, that parents that love their children, the children also cry too. But DHS smothers up that cry. You don't hear that cry because they report back lies to the court and say the children are getting along just fine. But if you talk to the school teachers, their classmates, you get a different story. So the article goes on. But those entrusted to carry out the desperately needed changes found the measure enabled a very different agenda. CPS agents and caseworkers could be trained to look at their industry as a profit center. The system began to view children as a product to be harvested and parents as barriers to be demolished. John?
Okay, we're going to tune in to a budget hearing in which the Director Concannon has a few words to speak on. This is his last message before the Council on the Department of Human Services. He resigned some time ago, and but they urged him to stay on through this budget process, and he was willing. Though his wife was not as willing, but he did consent to stay on a wee bit longer.
He probably got well paid to stay on a wee bit longer.
It could be. This is a website that we should have mentioned earlier when we talked about homeschool legal defense. You should dial into this website. There's a petition there that you may be interested in considering and submitting yourself in support of this amendment to the Constitution, which is focused on protecting parental rights. Here now, if we can get him up on the screen here, is Director Kevin Concannon in his final concluding remarks before the Iowa Department of Human Services Council. Kevin Concannon.
So we go then to Kevin for the director's report.
Well, thank you very much. Let me hand out these are copies of Roger's latest summary. We have a few of these for can spread them as far as we could. But this is the latest. We're doing this and sending them on to you just so you have a sense of what's going on in different parts of the state. But I must say, from my perspective, we've had staff, whether those eligibility workers or case workers or other people, some of whom I know are speaking with Denise Gonzalez over in Scott County, the service area manager, one of the afternoons when one of her workers was being excused because his home had just been condemned. He was down in either Louisa County or south of there where they had massive flooding. So as you say, some of our people are very directly affected. And it's really unprecedented. I mean, the scale and scope of this across the state. But we've had lots of people working centrally as well as out in the field, and I'm very proud of the work that our staff have been doing in this regard. Probably the newest item in this is that we are going to be sheltering at the Independence Mental Health Institute a substance abuse program for parents and children, not unlike, I think, the House of Mercy here. And their regular location is in the floodplain in Cedar Rapids. So they've been temporarily at Cornell College, but Cornell needs that dorm space for their students coming in. So they are in the process this week of moving into Independence MHI. They will do the staffing. We're simply providing space in one of the unused units, and we'll be providing food and some of the other central services to them. But basically, the operation will just be transferred for a period of months. We would expect several months anyway. The governor yesterday, or the president, I should say, presidential declarations were extended to another 7 counties. So now I think that number is at 78 of the 99 counties have presidential declarations. That is really extraordinary, because it's usually, it's typically a presidential declaration really hard to get, and it's very low, focused on a specific location. Think of a tornado touching down and maybe one community or county. Except for the northwest quadrant of the state, pretty much the rest of the state is incorporated into this. And it has implications for the DHS services to the extent that those presidential declarations are made. There are 2 subcategories. One is called public assistance. That's very confusing to people like me, because we tend to think of public assistance as TANF or, public welfare cash, and it doesn't extend to that at all. Public assistance refers to the broad infrastructure, and it has very direct implications, the public assistance aspect of it, for hospitals, for education facilities, for not-for-profit agencies. And we hosted a meeting over in Cedar Rapids last week ago today, for a series of private agencies, hospitals, and others, to bring them in so they would have an understanding of the potential help they may receive as an organization through the public assistance provisions. And that's very important for, as I said, the agencies. For individuals, the category is individual assistance, and we're up to 60-something counties in that regard. That has very direct implications for DHS, because the individuals who are affected adversely in these flood areas, they receive individual assistance. It can be up to a maximum of $28,000 if their home was destroyed or significantly damaged. I think the average of those payments has been running just under $5,000. And we expect, I think at last count, I haven't checked in the last week or so, we expected that through DHS, FEMA to DHS to individuals, there would be about $14.5 million to date anyway, issued in those emergency grants to individuals. And on the food assistance side, we are issuing emergency food assistance to families who would normally not qualify for the food stamp program or food assistance program, because their income or assets would prohibit that or would make them ineligible. And I was speaking with Ann Wiegers earlier today, and we are now at about $3.5 million we've issued in emergency food to families who are normally not eligible for food assistance. So they are huge. Now, a lot of people are going through terrible times in terms of damage they've suffered, but those are really significant ways of helping individuals, and we're now focused more on the public assistance side to help some of the organizations. The area of the state that unquestionably is the most severely affected, I've been referring to it as sort of ground zero, is the Lynn County area, Cedar Rapids, Halo, some of these communities, Johnston County as well, both the university and some of the neighborhoods that are in Coralville as well as Iowa City. But Cedar Rapids, just the scale of it is just almost hard to imagine until you've seen it. And there are a couple of shelters. There's an interesting aspect of Iowans in all of this. As many as close to 5,000 housing units were damaged in Cedar Rapids. But at the height of that damage, when the water was as high as it had ever, achieved or reached, the number of people in the shelters, the emergency shelters that were operating, was under 600 total. You say, where did everybody go? They went to relatives, they went to friends, they went to motels in you can draw a 60-mile radius around circumference around Cedar Rapids, and they were filling hotels and all of those. There were people with resources, financial resources. But the two shelters have gradually, their populations have declined to the point where, as yesterday, there are about 68 people in two shelters in Cedar Rapids. Now, some of those remaining people, a significant number of them, have mental health issues. There are people with chronic, some were in a residence that was downtown residence, Geneva Place, that had a number of people with disabilities living there. And the first two floors, or the first floor and the basement of that facility was underwater, so they can't reoccupy it. And we are working with the local county folks, FEMA and others, to say, and the city folks, what can be done by way of housing for some of these folks, because Geneva Place in whole won't be occupiable again. The upper apartments were not damaged, but they can't reoccupy it, they think, until at least September. And so that's probably the short term, one of the largest areas of concern we have for those, what we think may ultimately be less than 50 people, but nonetheless, it's important to them. Otherwise, I'd say we have had we just have had tremendous cooperation from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. CMS, Medicaid gave us waivers that they've not given before. The Food and Nutrition Service out of Denver, they gave us waivers that they said we've never granted to other states. Because an example of that is if you are in one of the affected counties and you move to live with a relative, let's say, or a friend, over in a county that is, let's say, up in the Northwest, that is unaffected or significantly unaffected, you can still get that emergency food benefit up there, as long as you can demonstrate that, hey, my residence is actually over in Louisa County or in Lynn or Johnson County. So we've had great cooperation from FNS, from the Medicaid program, from the Administration of Children and Families, because we've made exceptions around child care. Child care is a huge issue. There are over 1,000 children in that Cedar Rapids floodplain area, age 5 or under, 1,000 kids. So think of the child care implications of that. So we've been able to make exceptions on continuing eligibility, on staffing ratios, on locations of places, on if you're looking just to either reoccupy your house or find a better apartment, that constitutes eligibility for us in terms of you're meeting the work requirement. We've just had a lot of accommodations made by the federal agencies at our request. And yesterday our folks were before the Rules Committee, because we're catching up now with the rules to authorize what we've been basically doing for a few weeks. And for example, people are on Medicaid, Hawkeye, Iowa Care, TANF. We're extending their eligibility by 3 months. They still have to abide by the rules. The concern we had was, if I've lost my housing and I've got real worries to worry about, I may not be able to satisfy your requirement that I submit to you updated information on my income or my job status or what have you. So we just made a decision to, in the affected counties, extend that by 3 months. And I think in so doing, there's less disruption for at least the of people being able to access some of those typical services that we depend on. We also filed an application for mental health funds. We expect mental health issues will be huge and extended over many months as people come to realize, hey, I lost my job, I lost my housing that I spent my life perhaps acquiring. So we have filed an application, a multi-county application. That's been probably the most difficult one because we're dealing, in that case, with FEMA. We've had great success dealing with what I call the mainline federal agencies. FEMA can be a nightmare to deal with, is all I could say. That the rules kept changing, and the expectations kept changing. They were difficult to deal with around that mental health grant. But we now have staff working on a grant category under FEMA and SAMHSA, the Federal Mental Health Agency, for extended counseling over a 2-month period after the event, sort of during the recovery period. And our staff are in the midst of putting that together, and we're getting some help from the University of Iowa. One of their staff people are coming over to help us from the mental health program there, work with us on that. So. Otherwise, I think, the systems have responded very well. The communities are working well, together. So it's difficult for many, many people. There is a lot of concern in the Lynn County area about the reoccupation because they're going to tear down, I think, a couple of thousand houses there in that floodplain. And there's worry about what this is going to do to the workforce, to the population of the county and the city. And the worst fears that people have is their reference point to what happened in New Orleans. That, New Orleans lost a lot of its population. Now, this is not New Orleans by any stretch in terms of the ability of governments here, governments, the city, the counties, the state to respond to this. So I expect it's a huge challenge, and I know the university has huge challenges in the damage that they suffered over there as well. But that's really been our main focus. Now, this morning I had to step out here a little while ago. We have an issue with our 2 mental retardation resource centers are both under consent decrees. And they've been under consent decrees for 4 years now, 3.5, on issues that extended many years before that. As part of that consent decree that we entered into, and I was part of those negotiations, it was agreed that when the federal government would send in their experts, whatever the experts would find would be confidential. And the intent of negotiating that was to allow it to be the most candid assessment. I could say, you're doing a terrible job. And we would use that information to focus and motivate us to make improvements to the state. The Des Moines Register has real concerns about that. That's an understatement. They don't like that. And so we're likely to be releasing that information on the next day or so. That's why I had to step out to talk with our lawyers.
This is Kevin Kincannon making remarks about open government in cases where he'd rather see government closed. This is Kevin Kincannon, outgoing director of the Department of Human Services. Will be looking for another director very shortly.
This is a Clark Kaufman specialist. So word, that says, that'll give you an idea of what's coming our way, I think, probably the next year or so. That's the only other item that does concern me, but in more substantive ways, I know we're making progress there. We have a new superintendent at Woodward, is doing a great job, and Glenwood, there were more challenges there, but we're making progress there as well. So
This is the station. Tomorrow and you're leaving at 6 a.m.
I'm leaving this after the street, no. No, I think it's really innocent. You know, that's good against their turn. I've had another turn, I think, you know. But, well, no, the major area of focus for us is this, and then we're also developing our budget. And the budget instructions we received from the state, we heard a whole bunch of legitimate needs expressed by people this morning. But what we don't know at this point in time is what is the budget circumstance of the state going to be? What is the circumstance of the state economy going to be? And the good news is, right up until, I think it's the March revenue figures, the revenues for the state were running ahead of last year by 9%. And it's, you know, a reflection of the general economy. That's the good news. What is really unknown is what will be the result of this widespread flooding in terms of just the general state of the state's economy, the workforce, tax revenues, and I would say at this point, nobody really knows. We have been given budget instructions to limit our budget requests to status quo budget or budgets from, you know, similar to last year's. And it's always a challenge in areas like healthcare costs and so on, where it's such a big part of our budget, and even that modest increases, they continue to go up. So we're working our way through that. We met with our own staff in the agency and told them if you have ideas, they better be modest ones in terms of cost. And we will be meeting for a couple of days at the end of the month. That's when we basically try to put the framework of that budget together. So it's ready to send out to you and, you know, for your September hearing. And then what I've said to people, I was asked yesterday at a child welfare council meeting up at Drake. I said, you know, I think really we won't know until probably late in the fall, probably November, December. We'll have an idea what's happening in the aggregate in the state's economy. And then I know what I've read is after the '93 flooding, the year after the economy was booming because you had all this reconstruction and investment. So that's the silver lining maybe after this, maybe a year out. There may be a lot of activity to restore and repair, but short term we just don't know. So I think we have to be prudent in that regard to not dig a deeper hole for ourselves. Basically, that's what I've said. Stand by on that. I'm an optimist basically, so I'm hoping that it'll be better, but it's too early to say. Then I think Linda sent out the members of the selection committee for the DHS director, and Ruth is a member of that. And the committee, I'm quite, you know, the names that I see on that committee are, there's Bob Bacon from the University of Iowa, very strong advocate for people with disabilities and frail elderly folks, and he's very smart. He'll bring that perspective. Charlie Bruner, who usually I know known to many of you on the kids issues and public welfare. Kate Walton, who used to work for us, now is the governor's, you know, policy person, so she will bring a very informed.
You've been listening to the director, the outgoing director of the Department of Human Services, Kevin Kincannon, as he speaks before the Council on Human Services.
She will be a member of the committee. Danny Holman is the executive director.
We'll see you next week.
Traditionally,